Hello, hi, and welcome to the Tech Recruitment Takeover, Day 4. Really great to have everyone here on board. My name is Daisy Kent, and today we are talking about diversity and inclusion within tech. We've got a great lineup of panellists today. We're just going to wait for everybody to trickle in from the Zoom. I'm sure if you've been on these sessions previously, you know it takes a couple of minutes, but really great to have you all on. So today, I'd love to get started by having our panellists introduce themselves. So Sarah, Emily, if we could start with you.
Sure. Hi, my name is Sarah Emily, and I'm currently the Director of Talent at Amboss. I only started a month ago, so I'll do my best to speak with authority on what we're up to.
Perfect. And then Ben.
Hey everyone, it's Ben Ventum here, the UK Talent Acquisition Manager for IT at AstraZeneca.
And then Conway.
Hi, I'm Colin Mcdermott. I am just a junior developer recently out of a bootcamp, and I'm transgender.
And then Ade.
Hello, my name is Ade. I'm one of the SDRs here at HackerJob, and also a member of our D&I committee. Like many, I'm still learning, but I'm very honored to be a part of this panel today. So I look forward to sharing some of my thoughts.
Perfect. And finally, Timea.
Hello everyone, Timea, but just please call me Timmy. I'm a digital project manager leading a really big project at Savills. I have been recruited to the job via HackerJob, and I'm really honored to be here today. And I'm Hungarian, and I have a pre-settled status if it matters.
It doesn't matter at all, but thank you so much for sharing, and really great to hear about your work with Savills as well. Amazing. So I'm going to move on to some quick housekeeping just before we get started with the session today. So when asking questions, please ask them in the Q&A section. It just means it's easier for the panelists to see them, and then we'll be able to find them and answer them a lot easier. And we'll be answering your questions throughout the session, so please make sure to ask us whatever you'd like. You'll be invited to a new Zoom webinar each day, and invites will be sent out every afternoon. So make sure to email hello@hackerjob.co if you have any issues at all. And tell your friends about us. So we have a YouTube series, so the videos from each session are uploaded every day, and we'll send them out every day. We're also obviously on Twitter, LinkedIn, all social channels, and you can find us using the hashtags TRT and Tech Recruitment Takeover. And then on to the research. Why are we doing these daily sessions this week? So essentially at HackerJob, we recently created a report called What Do Tech Talent Want in 2021? And for this, we surveyed over 2K tech talent across all disciplines. So front end, back end, DevOps, data science, you name it, we surveyed these people. And we're sharing key findings from the report each day this week. You'll receive you'll receive the latest release of each report every day before the full report is shared very soon. And then in terms of our schedule, so obviously if you've been with us all week, you will have seen that on Monday, we went through how to perfect your outreach and comms. Tuesday was all about mastering the interview process. Wednesday featured the perks and benefits that matter most. And today we're really focusing on what diversity and inclusion means to individuals. And of course, it wouldn't be a HackerJob event without our wine tasting club. So if you attend 4 of the 5 sessions this week, you will receive an invite to the HackerJob Wine Club. This is a completely free virtual event on us, and you'll have the chance to meet with your #TRT peers and learn about wine with a professional sommelier. This invite is also, of course, extended to our panelists, so hopefully you'll get to meet a lot of them on the call as well, which is super exciting. And like I say, it's free wine on us, so make sure to keep attending these sessions. And then on to today's agenda. So today we're going to start by discussing why brand invisibility is no longer an option. We'll be sharing how to move the needle and make real change within your organisations. We'll be discussing what diversity and inclusion really means to individuals who work in tech. And then finally speaking about how we can tackle unconscious bias and provide better representation from the top down. So those are my slides. So I think in terms of getting started, we're going to start with our first insight and go from there. Oh, excuse me. So there we go. So first of all, something we wanted to highlight was that 77% of the tech talent we surveyed feel that their current employer's D&I policy is either good or excellent. Now, before I go into this, I really want to highlight that this is very much a surface level statistic, and we feel that, you know, whilst it appears quite positive on the surface, it actually does highlight how far we have to go. And I think sometimes organisations can use these kind of bigger high level statistics to say, well, we're doing an excellent job, when actually you need to kind of look at these statistics, break them down by job title, break them down by industry, break them down by how people identify, and kind of really look at it from that perspective. So I'm really keen to highlight that from the get-go. But I guess with this stat in mind, I'd love to start with you, Ade. You know, how do you feel about this stat? In the past year, it does seem like companies are listening more, but I'd love to hear your personal thoughts on this, and as well your kind of perspective from being on the D&I committee here at HackerJob.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah. I totally agree. It is quite a service level statistic, and there's a lot to unpick from that. But I think the big thing I take from that is there's still a lot to be done. And that's one thing that we've realized here in the D&I committee. You know, when we had our sessions, we often come up with so many ideas of all the things that we would love to do. And I think, you know, the realization is that there's a lot we can do, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we need to, you know, just cultivate a way to build from the ground up, essentially. I do agree, like in the last year, I haven't seen as much on my LinkedIn, you know, prior to as many people talking about diversity and inclusion, and it's great to see. It's great to see many people sharing their personal experiences, and yeah, I'm looking forward to see how things transpire in the future. But yeah, I agree, there's still a lot more to do.
And Timmy, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. How do you feel about this stat? And again, you know, what are your thoughts on your company's own D&I initiatives?
Well, on my current company, I'm really satisfied. So I feel that at Savills, these numbers are right, and not just, how did you say, surface numbers. But yes, throughout my professional career, I have experienced what Ade is talking about, that in depth, you should examine the numbers, because sometimes it's just an image.
And then Conway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
So I kind of, as I'm relatively new, I've only done sort of freelance work. I kind of don't have an insight from within a tech company, but my first reaction to that would be, what are the demographics of that 70% who think that the thing is great? Because if it's like, and this is not with any kind of criticism, because I think big strides have been made everywhere, but you only experience what you experience. So like, if 70% of your workforce is like white men, and that 70% all think that the diversity inclusion is great, and the 30% that aren't are the 30% who disagree, then maybe that's, so yeah, I don't think that that's, like, for that 70% to think that there's that it's good or great, that represents that the company, I think, is making a really visible effort that its employees think of it well. Like, it's definitely still relevant, but I agree with what's been said, that it is a very surface level statistic and doesn't necessarily kind of reflect.
Absolutely. No, absolutely, 100%. And I think it's really important to highlight that off the bat. You know, when you are kind of doing these internal D&I surveys within your place of work, think about that. Think about the people you already have in your organisation and how that can reflect back on the data that you find from that. That's definitely something that we would really want businesses today who are on this call to kind of take away from that, for sure. Coming to you, Essie, something we've discussed as an organisation previously, you know, is that idea of brand invisibility and how, you know, now brands can't stay silent on issues. Obviously, organisations are starting to make a change, but what more can they be doing?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think we seem to be overly emphasizing the visibility of people's policies. And while it's great to be visible, because yes, it removes kind of some of these pieces are still taboo to some people to talk about. So you are removing some of the stigma that's attached to discussing some of these topics, or you're encouraging some more uncomfortable conversations. I still feel that we are too hung up on whether or not people are visibly, or whether or not companies are visibly investing in looking to make an actual change. And so by over investing in the visibility aspect, are you actually making changes that are effective, or are you actually moving towards a more inclusive workforce? Are you actually moving towards representation? And so for me, actually, I think the focus, and certainly for the last couple of companies that I've worked with, the focus has very much been on the results. So are we including more people? Do we have increased representation? Because that then by itself will force the conversation internally, which will then make you more visible ultimately. So to me, like I say, the question is much more about, are you doing the right things to make sure that you have representation and inclusion, rather than are you seen to be talking about important topics rather than actually getting stuff done. So taking action to me is a much more important aspect of this.
Definitely. I think something that we've discussed at HackerJob quite a lot is that you do see companies, I don't want to say jumping on the bandwagon, but also being very visible on things like social media about certain topics and things that are happening in the world globally. But then actually, you have to continue to support and do your research and make sure that you are well equipped to help make positive impact and change on these issues afterwards as well. It's not enough to kind of retweet something or do a hashtag or anything like that. It's so much more than that. I completely agree. And I think especially larger organizations maybe listening today, it's really important to kind of think about how you can support initiatives, other businesses, your people long term versus in the short term. Ben, I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well. What can organizations be doing more of?
Yeah, and it's I guess firstly, the stat you mentioned does, in my opinion, feel more or less right, and certainly from a sense that D&I is at the forefront of many businesses' agendas. I see it on my social feed. I see it when I speak to colleagues and ex-colleagues. The increased visibility and noise is there. We've definitely taken a shift in the right direction, but it's really easy. And he mentioned, for any company or person to talk the talk, and the question is there actual substance there? Is there long-term substance? To quote the cliche phrase, walking the walk. And it'll be also interesting to know, and I think you mentioned it, but the breakdown of those surveyed, because I'm conscious that a FTSE 100 company probably has a lot more things they're doing in that space than maybe a smaller company that doesn't have necessarily the amount of money or capability to be proactive in that space. But to come back to your question, no, I don't think brands can any longer stay silent on issues of D&I, which is a good start, right? We need this shift to take place to have that almost a domino effect on incremental positive steps forward. Of course, there's much more businesses and society as a whole need to do, and I think fundamentally that sits with education. We need to educate our businesses, leaders, managers, employees, about what is diversity. I think there's still a lack of people understanding actually what is it. It's not just the color of your skin. Diversity is huge, and it's about actually asking them and finding out what does it mean to you. Why do we need diversity? What's the value of it to us in the business? And what can each of us do to support, not just the company, and really then have those honest conversations and addressing those questions that people have got in the business in an honest, open, transparent way, so that you give your employees a voice and you can really express how they feel in a safe environment.
Absolutely. And actually, we've just had a question come in from somebody who says, leaders and people in HR are saying that making change is great. But is there anything that individuals can do as part of a company to improve their own approach to D&I? Should the onus be on colleagues too? Ben, what do you think about that?
100%. Yeah, it starts with everybody. And I mean, first and foremost, I think you have to educate yourself. There's no point going into this without having done your homework, and there's so much to read. There's so many stories you can look at, and I'm still learning things every week. I'm learning something else, or finding out about something about unconscious bias, all these different things that are out there. And but I guess probably the key thing is just being confident to talk about it. I think so many people are still reserved. They're scared of talking about this. And I'm by no means an expert when it comes to D&I. I just feel passionate about it, and I'm prepared to come on things like this and talk about how I feel about it. And I think we need more people to do that, to feel like they're in a safe environment to do that. And really, I think to have mass change and positive change, we need as many people as possible being confident about talking it and making that change. So yeah, hopefully that kind of gives my stance on that question.
Definitely. Essie, what about you? Anything to add there?
Only one point, I think, which is also, I mean, I agree with everything that Ben said, first of all, and my addition would be comfortable to ask questions. So part of educating yourself is also, I suppose that there's a certain vulnerability to it. And I think this is why it's become such a taboo or an uncomfortable topic for some people, because they're scared of saying something wrong, or they're scared of what they don't know, which inherently they don't know. So really just be comfortable asking questions. You're not going to be met with anything other than, I mean, in my experience, certainly I'm very comfortable asking those questions, and I've never been met with anything other than, the questions have been very welcome whenever I've had to ask them. So yeah, that was the other piece that I think would nicely round off all the points that Ben made in terms of an individual approach rather than a holistic organizational approach to informing people about D&I and what diversity truly means.
Definitely. I think I couldn't agree more with what you both said, to be honest. I think it can feel scary and a bit overwhelming to kind of talk about D&I, what diversity inclusion really means. And the thing is as well, you are going to get it wrong. And I'm sure all of us as panelists have got it wrong at some stage, but the point is you learn, you come back from it, and you continue and you grow, and then you help and support others in that way as well. And then by you doing that, you can educate others and your peers as well. And it just, it can come full circle. Don't be afraid to get it wrong, always ask questions, and just do the best that you can do there. So Timmy and Conway, we've had a question here, how important is a company's D&I approach when choosing to work there? If we could start with you, Timmy.
Well, to be honest, what Conway said really resonated with me and made a lot of notes, because when I was preparing for this whole panelist diversity thing, the world of white men is really still strong in senior leadership teams, decision-making teams, strategic teams. Usually, if you're invited to an interview with a team lead, a tech lead, it's usually a white male. And even though I spent 7 months unemployed in the United Kingdom, I had some, and I went for all the jobs available in my range of expertise. I always checked out the companies about us and our team and our leadership team. And it was really lovely, good looking, white, old guys, above 50-ish, 60-ish, all in suits. And I was like, I can imagine myself with all my tattoos and everything I have, and the way I communicate, brutally honest, and the way I lead my teams and my projects, and the way I am a young Hungarian woman in tech in the UK. And I have to agree with Conway. I really, really don't like the companies. I always check out the team who's going to be on the interview, but I always start with a bias that this is not going to be fun, to be honest.
No, thank you for sharing.
While on the surface, you see the wonderful ads of the company, that beautiful, lovely, happy, sorry to say all these words, about gay and colored and young and old people laughing together with the company. So looking forward to the beautiful future with the company, while the whole senior leadership is all white guys. So
absolutely. And the topic of senior leadership is actually something that we are coming on to later in the session, but I completely agree. And there is that kind of feeling of, all this stock imagery of people looking so good and so happy. And it's just, work is real life. Work is where you spend, sometimes more time than you might spend with your friends or your family, depending on the role that you do. And that it has to be honest and authentic. And I think businesses really need to think about that, definitely. Conway, what's your take on this? Does a company's D&I approach, would you look into that before going for a role?
Yeah, I mean, obsessed with everything Timmy just said. I completely agree. And I think in particular what an experience that myself and a friend of mine share is that, like, anytime we're on a project together, so she's got dwarfism, and anytime we're on a project together and it comes time to take a picture of the team, we both get shoved to the front. And obviously she's quite petite, so it might make sense, but I'm like 5'11", and it's just very, so when you're like at the front of those magazines to go, hey, look at all the things we've got, at first glance, if you're looking at a company, that front is kind of sending a message that says, you are going to be safe in this company. We are actively and deliberately trying to be inclusive of people like you. And at first glance, that actually is important. And that, even that kind of shallow gesture towards, look, we want a diverse workforce. Like the bar is on the floor. The bar is so low that actually that's important. But once you're over that bar, if you get into the workplace and you find that actually in your day-to-day life, you go into work and you don't, I mean, I think it's an experience shared by a lot of female coders, is that they will go to work on tech teams where there are no other female coders and they are the only one. I know that my partner was quite often the only female coder in an entire company. So even when she quit, the percentage of their kind of statistics of diversity and inclusion would go down by 100%. So I do think that it is definitely something that I look for when kind of considering new companies. But as everyone said, that first glance, that first kind of the way you look is not going to be enough.
Absolutely, definitely.
Sorry, I just wanted to add,
go for it.
I really feel Conway here, but basically what I wanted to add, that it's not an instant negative reaction that, okay, it's a white male world. It's not you're expecting negative, how to say, bias, but it's rather rooted in the communication and the politics, because women, men, and everybody out there handle things differently. A female lead or a female coder always has a different perspective than all the male ones, because you can't switch off your brain. This is how you work. And the important thing is whether your way of thinking and your word gets an equal point. But already, if you're the one single female coder, single female lawyer, but you're the single female coder, the only one, and you have let's say a scrum meeting, your vote is one vote against all the guys. So what your way of thinking might always suffer minority votes, basically.
Definitely. And then Ade, I have a question for you here. I think you'd be very well placed to answer this. If somebody does say something wrong, how can they go about fixing it? I'm thinking really here, from your perspective, being on the D&I committee, like, what should people do when they say the wrong thing? Because inevitably we will at some stage.
Is that from perspective of someone being discriminatory, or if we say something as just be not too educated in the matter?
It doesn't say, it's an anonymous question, so I would take it whichever way you prefer.
I think for the format, if someone said something to me that was deemed racist or discriminatory, what I would personally do would be to report it. I can't control other people's actions. I can only control mine, right? So the best thing to do is escalate that. I think on the matter of I guess, because I know Ben touched on this earlier, when people, especially white males and even white people in general, in question of race, I always draw a point on race because that's, I guess, more of a closer thing for me in terms of diversity. I think that, especially in the wake of the George Floyd death and the rise of the the Black Lives Matters movement, I think a lot of people were, prior to that, were scared to speak up out of fears of saying the wrong thing, or just looking like uneducated in the matter. And I hold my hands up and say, I was one of those people. And it sounds a bit redundant being a Black person, but I was one of those people because I always kind of thought, how would it come across? Would it look like I'm playing a race card? All these kind of things, all these kind of elements to it. And I think what is really highlighted, especially for the UK and UK organizations, is that racial bias still exists, gender bias still exists, all of these biases still exist, and they were just recessive. No one was really speaking about them. And I think, again, so I like what Ben said earlier on, the biggest thing is education. I'm being confident in just speaking about it.
Perfect, thank you. No, brilliant, definitely, I completely agree. Okay, so let's move on to our next, I suppose, insight. So when we surveyed the developers and engineers and we asked them for their sentiment on what diversity and inclusion means to them, we got a lot of comments about tech needing to move on from feeling like a boys' club and a very kind of male-only culture. And so, Essie, I'd love to start with you and kind of hearing steps that organisations, your organisation is taking internally to kind of move the needle and combat this.
So what I will start with is that Amboss, within the engineering and product sphere, we have 30% female representation. So I think that's a step in the right direction. We're certainly not where I would like to be. And also certainly I would like to measure many other groups that are underrepresented. But I think that's a great first. And again, I inherited this role 3.5 weeks ago, so bear with me. But there are several things that we have already started looking at in order to make sure that we include a wider variety of underrepresented groups, and we also get more towards genuine representation, meaning that we would have also more females on the team, because 30% isn't enough. So we have undertaken sourcing sprints that are specifically targeting some of the different underrepresented groups to ensure that our top of funnel is corrected. And what I mean by that is that naturally you will find more white males that will apply top of funnel naturally through your careers page. It is proven, there are many studies, men are simply more comfortable applying for roles than females and other underrepresented groups. And so we wanted to correct, I suppose, what that incoming flow looked like by implementing these sourcing sprints, targeting solely the other groups that are not naturally represented within our funnel. We've also looked at our job descriptions, so we've reworded them, and now we're about to go through and ensure that we have neutrality in the language. I think this is something that we discussed a couple of weeks ago when we met. Actually, at my last company, we ended up using Be Applied for budgetary reasons. I've been working in startups now for a couple of years, and we just don't have the kind of budgets that I have had with previous employers such as Uber. So we used Be Applied to make sure that our job descriptions are completely neutral in terms of their use of language, ensuring that they're not overly charged with masculine or feminine language, and ensuring that we are creating I suppose, a more comfortable way for people to apply. But I have to stress that this goes hand in hand with internal policies to make sure that there is then inclusion after you create diversity. So yes, we want to make sure that we bring in the right different groups of people, to ensure that there is representation, to ensure that you have this multi-viewpoint that actually Timmy brought up, right? Is that you don't just have the same frame of mind and the same frame of reference looking at the same problem, all looking to solve it the same way. That's why you want representation in your group. But then how do you make sure that they feel included? So if they are in the minority, how do you then make sure that they feel part of something sort of bigger? How do you make sure that they have access? And these are all the kinds of things that you need to consider, because simply solving the issue with incoming talent isn't enough. You then need to make sure that you're creating a space for them as well. So those are some of the things that we've been looking at. There's obviously a lot more to come, but that's 3.5 weeks in, we're doing okay. So I think that's a fair enough description from what we're up to at Amboss.
Absolutely. I can't believe you're only 3.5 weeks in. Like, you're so,
honestly, neither can I.
You're in the trenches so much already. I mean, Ben, same question. What are you doing at AstraZeneca to combat this and make people feel more comfortable within the organisation?
Thanks. It sounds like Essie's had a busy 3 weeks. I guess as primarily a tech recruiter, it's something I've been focused on quite a bit, and I'm sure we've all read the reports about, I think, 19% of women in tech, and there probably is still a legacy of tech being male dominated, or at least certainly perceived that way. I kind of think I'm in a bit of a bubble where I am, and I'm very conscious that I only really see it from an AstraZeneca lens. So I say personally, from my experience, it doesn't feel that way anymore. It feels like we've moved away from the old style thinking that tech is male dominated. But I'm very conscious that I am in a bit of a bubble. And our IT leadership team is a 50-50 balance of male and female. Our chief digital officer and CIO is a woman, and that certainly helps to support our message of supporting gender diversity in tech. But I guess probably good to stress here that just by having a IT leader that's a woman at the top doesn't mean you've nailed everything and it's all fine and you've kind of completed gender diversity. Having women in leadership roles across all areas of tech and the whole organization is really important, and that's something that we've really focused on. So ultimately, there's consistency at all levels. These women act kind of naturally and subconsciously as our D&I champions. And a phrase that I always remind myself of, and I really love the short phrase, is if you can see it, you can be it. And I've heard so many women say to me, the fact that I can see there are women on the leadership board that are in high levels of tech management gives me the belief that I can progress in this company. And I think that's so true. So I think a business has to ensure its own internal policies are aligned to supporting, embracing diversity, as well as challenging it as well. But I guess the key thing is this isn't something that comes from HR. And often when I see it, these things come from HR, and I talk to other people and say, oh, HR have put this policy in. But it shouldn't just be HR, it should be ingrained throughout the business. And that essentially starts from the top down. One particular thing I wanted to mention is, so I've been passionate about pushing our women in tech as just one small part of diversity. And last year I set up my own AstraZeneca Women in Tech series, essentially just to celebrate our women in tech, giving them a platform to have a voice, but also to inspire and empower more women to enter the tech world, and giving them that confidence that it isn't a male-dominated arena anymore. Well, certainly some parts of it not, but just changing that narrative. And we need more women and girls growing up in schools, colleges, universities to start seeing more women in the media, on social media and tech, and in leadership positions, and so we can change that narrative. And that's why I've been really passionate about doing this. And I feel compelled in my role to help influence other organizations to make those positive changes. Because to truly change the narrative, it needs to be a collective mission. And one of the popular themes I've really enjoyed emphasizing is actually demystifying the stereotypical roles and entry routes for women into tech, away from the kind of traditional coding jobs and the need for a computer science or software engineering degree, and actually using real life examples of entry points. And one of the great examples I've had on the series is actually one of our women in tech that entered into the tech world as an apprentice, having had 2 children. I think she was kind of mid-30s, so it's kind of unheard of, really. But actually, that's happening a lot more now, and it's something I think we really need to kind of push out there, that it's not just you go and do a coding degree and then you can go into IT. So yeah, that's my kind of take on what we've been doing.
And Essie, did you have anything to add on that? Sorry.
I did. I didn't want to interrupt, so I did the whole hand raising thing. I'm learning how to use all these fun new buttons on Zoom. So yes, the one thing I wanted to add is that I really like what Ben is saying about making sure that you create the visibility, so that then you're influencing either younger girls or women that are looking to make a career change, or other underrepresented groups that then see themselves reflected. And I don't want to speak on behalf of other groups, but I imagine it's a similar concept. As a woman, to see women in leadership, I find that really inspiring. So I imagine that for other underrepresented groups, it's the same thing. The importance is, and this actually links to that quite nicely, is the importance of allies. So you don't just make it the people who are underrepresented's job. So it's not necessarily always my job, in my case, to make sure that we, and I hate this expression, but it kind of sums it up quite nicely, but it's not just my job to send the elevator back down. Yes, I am very happy to make sure that I make room for apprenticeships, or that I, work experience students, or whatever that might look like. I'm very happy to do so. But also, for every one of me, there are many, many more men at this level. And it's important for us to have allies that will also then create the space for us to get there. So whether that's mentorship, or if it is just giving access to people for work experience, or if it's considering an atypical profile, which again speaks to Ben's point, if it's considering somebody that has come to this with a very different or non-stereotypical route through education of some sort, it's important to create that space for them. So don't always make it the person who's underrepresented's job to create more representation, I think, is my bottom line on that.
Definitely. I wanted to ask our other panelists now. I think, Timmy, it'd be great if I could start with you. I'd love it if you could use this space to kind of share what D&I really does mean to you as an individual.
Well, as an individual, I'm still one of the lucky ones, because I'm, mostly white, but you never know with Hungarians. But still Central European and coming from a shared service background, and I'm sure that techie teams know what that means. You're always second in line. So for me, diversion and inclusion means, for example, when I heard of Brexit, I have been traveling to the UK, working here frequently, and instead of like my others traveling home, I wanted to move out with the last plane ticket I could. And basically within my own company, and I don't mean to say any bad words, because in an individual level, everyone were really nice. But that was the time when I discovered that on the big billboards, it says that you have all the opportunities for training and for career within our organization. But that when you wanted to go from Hungary, a really cheap product owner position, it's a really good tech position, but really cheap, and you want to migrate to what you're actually worth in the UK, and guess what? There is no inclusion. So basically another company hired me, and they knew a lot about Hungarians, and they were really, and sorry, but I have to say it, fingers up for Avis, because they paid for my relocation, and they wanted to make sure even my mental health, how I'm doing all alone in this country, etc., etc. So this is what makes a difference on an individual level. And this is, for me, what diversion and inclusion means. Or when you go into a really serious tech meeting on specifications and codes and stuff, and a tall Scottish guy is hiding behind you because my little Hungarian is defending the tech team. So this is when you feel included.
I love that response.
Thank you.
I honestly love it. Conway, same question to you.
if I'm super honest, my knee-jerk response to diversity and inclusion is still to think of it as quite cynical, I think, and still to think of it as like, okay, we've realized that on paper we don't look diverse enough, so we're gonna have to hire a load of people. That's my my knee-jerk reaction to hearing the phrase from kind of past experience. But I think that despite having said that, I know that places are doing better. Even just hearing what Timmy has said, I think paints a really beautiful picture of like what it means to actually support someone who's coming from not just they've gotten a STEM degree and now are moving from like one part of the UK to another part of the UK to work in a company. Like that like approach that Timmy just described of being supported in moving from Hungary to the UK, being supported in their mental health, taking the time to actually consider what is required by someone who doesn't come from the background that you might expect that you're hiring from. What, sorry, my brain's gone completely dead and I've forgotten what Sarah Emily said earlier. I apologize for forgetting your name, Sarah. About the changes to the hiring process, that like material changes based on knowing how people respond to language and how different groups will respond to those job applications, and making those material changes that actually will make your workplace more accessible to a wider number of people and to people who don't come from backgrounds that you might expect applications to come from. Yeah, so that's all my thoughts. Sorry.
Don't apologise. I think that's brilliant. I think it's really important that people listening today hear this. Don't apologise for speaking your truth and speaking the truth, definitely. Ade, what about you? What does D&I mean to you as an individual?
It's a difficult one, and like I said, I'm still learning. But for me, I look at D&I from two perspectives. I look at it from the perspective of the underrepresented and the perspective of the majority. For the underrepresented, I think it is to feel like they can be themselves, share aspects of themselves regardless of what environment they're in. And for the more represented, the privileged, I think it's the responsibility of acceptance and education, accepting people as they are and wanting to learn about people as they are. You know, and coming back to what is it to be yourself at work? I think it goes beyond just sharing different, you know, cultural ideas. I think it's, you know, again, to hit home in that point, it's an element of striving to understand and accept people as they are. It's okay to not be 100% aware of a topic. It's okay to feel vulnerable. You shouldn't have to hide these things from the rest of your workmates to feel more palatable or accepted. And I think, you know, that's a huge thing. Can you be yourself at work?
Absolutely. Timmy, did you have something to add?
Yeah, what I wanted to add, because Ade and Conway, you just selected us so perfectly. But basically what I wanted to say that I worked a lot at multinational companies where you have these awareness and tolerance days, where you have all these Pride Week with all the lovely rainbows and stuff. Or when you have gender awareness or ethnicity awareness week, lovely. And you have trainings where the people who are already affected or the people who are friends with them attend the meetings, lovely. There is not, or you have to watch a video on cultural and gender and ethnicity bias. It's in your mandatory training when you enter a company. It's in your onboarding list. And that's where you finished. And there are no, let's say, a barbecue day where you don't allow people to click, because as a white female, it's really easy to click. Everyone wants to click with you. You're even more approachable than a white male. But what if you put groups together, really, really diverse groups, and give them actual things to do together? Because then they have to speak to people they watch in bias videos. They have to say that, oh, look at that, this Pakistani guy is just lovely. Oh, wow, I went home and actually, you know what? I shook hands with so different people. This is what companies should be doing instead of putting up balloons everywhere. And, that's what I wanted to say. Sorry.
No, complete. I mean, listen, this hasn't happened at Hacker Job, but the amount of times I've worked for a company and they've gone, we're celebrating Pride, here's a rainbow cake. And I'm like, wow, a cake. And I love cake, don't get me wrong, any excuse to eat a slice, I will, but that's not really the point, is it? Do you know what I mean? No.
And a short message to PR and comms teams. If you're looking for the buzzwords, you should leave awareness and tolerance and change it to acceptance, I think.
I think a brilliant message for people listening today, definitely. So we've had some more questions come in. One of which I think would be great for you to answer, Essie, is targeting specific groups when sourcing a form of positive discrimination? And if it is that okay? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay. So I will preface this as this is my personal opinion. I will speak specifically on the subject of women, because I am one. So I think there is absolutely room for positive discrimination, first of all, yes. Why? Let's look at women in their 30s, right? So there was a study by the Fawcett Society. It was featured in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago. Women in their mid-30s, which I know it's difficult to believe, I am one. But women in their mid-30s will not see pay equality in their lifetime, right? So yes, if we had adopted positive discrimination sooner, myself and my peers would see equal pay in our lifetime. So yes, until we have true equality, yeah, there's absolutely room for it. Until we have true representation, yes, there's absolutely room for it. Because that is what you have to do. You have to over-index in order to have true representation within your workforce, and in order for that workforce to have true representative equality of voice within your workforce, right? So it's not only okay, I think it's mandatory. If what we're saying is true and we're saying we want this equality and we want representation, then you have to continue to discriminate until you have it. And a measure for me is something I feel particularly strongly about, which is pay equality. And if women of my generation won't see it, as the studies suggest, then we're not doing enough positive discrimination. And that's just women. There are statistics that are far more shocking. For example, for women of color, they have an even lower chance of achieving this. And then there are many other represented groups that I haven't even mentioned. But I'll happily share the link to this study because it's a very interesting one that will take you a while to read. So you might need a glass of something to get through it. But it's it's obviously something I feel really strongly about, so I won't go on about it. But yes, it's not only okay, we absolutely should be doing it for all groups that do not currently have equality in their representation.
That is completely my personal opinion as well, definitely. Ben, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, it's a really good question and an emotive one, I think, as well. And I, again, my personal opinion, and I know I have a background, I did 2 years in the police, so law was always something I was very interested in. I know positive discrimination, if I'm right, is illegal under the Equality Act, I think. So I guess where I stand is, and how I try and look at things is, I'm trying, if they've taken a job, for example, you want to go out to a wide audience. My aim is to try and target every single area of the candidate base, be it women, be it women of color, trying to tackle everything, and being, I guess, equal for all. But then I guess I'm probably contradicting that by creating a Women in Tech series where I focus on interviewing women in tech, and the diversity of women in tech that we have to really push that message. And do I do that with the men in tech that we have? I don't. So I would say yes, probably I am positively discriminating to build up the percentage and ensure that we have got the right diversity of women in tech. So it's a difficult one, because I know some people feel really strongly about not being positively discriminating, and I probably take the stance of, well, it should be equal for all, but we should make sure that we are going after everyone in terms of, if we're looking for a job, we should be reaching out to every single person. Everybody's got a fair and equal chance. But I'm also fully conscious that I do a lot around the women in tech piece, which is a very small part of the diversity piece, and therefore I probably do discriminate positively. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, thank you. No, I completely get it, definitely. I think, so Ade, a question for you. How would you advocate for D&I with a colleague who maybe doesn't understand its importance? And I can probably offer my 2 cents on this as well, but I'd love for you to start with that one.
Gosh, it's a tough one, because I think it's about experiences. It's about sharing experiences. I think sharing experiences with other colleagues about, what it is like to be in other people's shoes. Because I think when we can take a step out of our own shoes and place ourselves in what it's like to be a woman or Black person, what is it like to go through life as this person? And if you can kind of like understand that, you should want to learn about these things, and you should want to, encourage, encourage people that have been discriminated about against. So personally, it's a tough one, because I'm a firm believer that if you have a mind is there to be changed, and I think the only way that can be changed is through just talking, having conversations, and a willingness to have those conversations.
Absolutely. I think from my own personal experience, I think it's about treating that individual with compassion in a sense, and not wanting to fire up against them immediately because they, you feel that they are wrong. I think sometimes, I completely agree, you have to talk to them and kind of really show them actually what it is like for you in your scenario. And that is really the only way you can move forward. And obviously I can only talk about this from a tiny perspective, so obviously being a woman, but also I am from a low socioeconomic background. So I grew up on a council estate, and so a lot of people don't kind of recognise what that's like really. And I'm incredibly lucky. I've got a lovely accent. I went to university in Surrey, like I'm fine. But I think sometimes it can be really frustrating when somebody, you've got a colleague who maybe doesn't advocate for D&I, but it's super important that you treat them with compassion, you keep trying with them, and I think eventually people do come around, but I just think, unfortunately for some individuals, it just takes them longer than others. That's what I would say on that one myself. A question as well that we're having is, what is the panel's take on diversity of thought? So this person said they keep hearing this term quite often. Essie, what's your take on diversity of thought?
I think this is actually something that was illustrated really nicely by Timmy's, I think it was your point earlier, where the mention was of being a solo female representative within, or almost solo female representative within a wider engineering team, and that everyone was looking at the problem the same way because they have the same point of view. They've come from a really similar background. There is this kind of uniform way of thinking if you're all the same, and the diversity of thought comes when you bring people like Timmy into your team, because they will look at things differently because of their viewpoint, right? And actually this is very true for Conway as well. Conway comes from a very different educational background in their approach to to getting to where ultimately they are now. And so that in itself means that Conway may approach things or view things differently from how others do in the same profession. So that's diversity of thought. And how important is it? Very. There are apps that were created by all male teams, and this isn't always the case, but then they forget about, you know, and all male white teams, sometimes even more topical, because then you forget about your user group. Your user group is not always you. Your user group could be predominantly female. Your user group could be predominantly people of color, or people from, I mean, there's all kinds of things. Essentially, the bottom line is your user group may not look like you. And so therefore, diversity of thought, especially within engineering and tech overall as a bigger bracket, is actually super important, and has to be encouraged, because otherwise it actually could affect your efficacy as a business as well, right? Because then your user group is or can become disengaged with your product as a result of you not catering to who you think your user group is, because you don't have anyone truly representing them internally. So that's the way that I look at it. And certainly I always look for it within my teams. Obviously I don't run an engineering team. My team is always a bunch of recruiters. And so we have one thing in common, we're a little bit cocky, but frankly, I have, I think 6 different nationalities on my team. And I'm super proud of that. And I've always encouraged, as a nomad myself, I really enjoy having that around me, that kind of variety in thought. I know I'm not always right, very secure in that knowledge. So always really happy to be schooled and educated by those around me. And so I think it's really important, like I say, for your organization as a whole, but also for ultimately your consumer, that you have it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think we're almost out of time. So I just have one more question for our panelists. So Ben, I think if we start with you, obviously you're such an advocate for D&I. Could you please share that one takeaway that people listening today could take away to implement within their own organizations, just one small thing?
Oh, okay. I'm conscious of time, so I won't take up too much time. So one thing I would recommend, other than, first of all, sorting out all your internal policies and having a real look at your business, and before you jump into paying for things or implementing things. But one thing that I want to recommend is that is a tool called Textio, and it's a platform that we use. It's essentially an augmented writing platform that serves as a writing coach when we're building an advert, and they pick up instances of gender bias, age bias, cultural bias, by utilizing natural language processing. So they can use this to ensure that our ads are balanced, and also pick up on other areas of diversity too. So it's a really good tool. We use it globally now for all of our job ads, and especially when over 90% of employers lean more on the masculine side of writing, it really helps us target a wider audience and going after the under diverse populations that we're really trying to target. So that's my top tip. So definitely have a look at them, and I fully recommend them.
And Essie, same question.
I just very cheekily made a comment already in the chat, but I just wanted to make the point that there are many other tools if you don't have AstraZeneca budget, which I have not since working for Uber. So I've been bootstrapping my approach for some time. And so, yeah, Be Applied is an option. There's also multiple others that we tested when we were looking at it at my previous company. For me, actually, the biggest thing is to coach your staff and encourage a conversation. What has worked really well for us is to start that conversation by rolling out unconscious bias training. Why? Because it makes you acknowledge and confront your bias while also teaching you how to manage and reduce its effect, its negative effect particularly, on either your hiring process or your treatment of those around you. And it can really educate people who, I mean, it's called unconscious bias for a reason. Some people truly just don't see it until you tell them, and then they see it, and then they learn how to manage it. So for me, everything else aside, that's how you can make the people welcome that you're bringing into your organization.
Perfect. And then Conway, what should organizations be doing to improve their D&I overall, especially within engineering, in your opinion?
I would say, I think Sorry.
No, you're absolutely fine. Take your time. It's all good.
Kind of to bounce off what you said, Daisy, about coming from a lower economic background, I would say if you consider that in your applicants, if you consider like that the person applying for your job might be working, might be currently working like a retail job, especially for like a junior developer, that they might not have an infinite amount of kind of free time for 3-week-long tech tests because they're kind of concerned with the material needs of survival. Like, if you are considerate of like lower income people, that will also capture more women, more kind of people who experience racism, more trans people, because all of those kind of disenfranchised groups in the UK at least tend to be low income. So I would say be mindful of class in your class and income in your hiring processes, as well as everything else.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Timmy, anything to add there?
Yes, and since it's a recruitment, what companies should be doing, in my opinion, and it was a really good to see as throughout the pandemic, the market has changed throughout the summer. And before and after, I keep receiving daily emails and everything from headhunters that they so want me to join with lovely salary to their company. In the summer, I was knocking on everyone's door, and maybe it doesn't exist, but just one advice: don't look at the name or the strange photo. You can check them out on LinkedIn or something. Or if it's a foreigner, always, just what Conway said, always dig in the second, third lines, because there are people out there with the same amount of expertise, maybe not the best sounding universities on the below on the bottom section of their CVs, but it's definitely worth at least a screening interview, because you might find gems in the trash.
I couldn't agree more, especially when it comes to photos, names, all of that kind of stuff. You don't know until you're chatting to somebody and you get to know them. You have no idea. So don't judge a book by its cover. Ade, final word with you.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I was having a conversation with our CEO the other day, and we're talking about companies always trying to tick this diversity box, and there's an expectations that we can magically create diverse candidates. And the reality is that there is a lack of diversity, and it's an industry-wide problem. And my focus more shifts to what can we do with the younger generation to impact the future. And I want to see more organizations in partnerships with schools, going into schools, encouraging young ones, just to, I think I personally just feel like that will make such a big difference, because I know that would have made a big difference for me when I was younger, seeing a variety of choices, not just what my African parents fed me, which is, doctor, lawyers. I mean, I just seen a variety of choices. I might have just considered doing tech.
Absolutely. Well, we are way over time, but I wanted to say a massive thank you to our panelists. I think this has been such a brilliant conversation, really open, raw and honest, and exactly what these conversations need to be like in your own organisation. So if you're listening today, I really hope this conversation inspired you. I really hope it made you kind of hungry for change and wanting to do more. Thank you so much to our panelists, and we will be back again tomorrow for our final Tech Recruitment Takeover session of the week. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.